views and opinions expressed by the following paid program are those of the program producers, and they do not reflect the views and opinion of Global Ministries Christian Church, its staff, or management.
This is the time when we open up the doors to you and we let them in. When you're up, let 'em in. When you're down, let 'em in. When you're bound, let 'em in. Let 'em in.
Are y'all ready to hear the word tonight?
Welcome to this week's What's on the Menu. Here are your hosts, Tracy Lithcutt and James Levesque.
Here we go, Jay Jizzy. Are you here in the house today?
Trey, you know I'm always here with you, big bro.
I love having you here, Jay. I love having you here. But Jay, I got to ask you a question. I could have swore I was either watching World News, reading USA Today, something. I could have sworn I heard somebody say that they're now building swimming pools in prison. Did you hear anything about that?
I heard about that.
Did you?
Swimming pool.
Pools.
I thought prison was for punishment.
I did too, Jay. I'm curious. We had my man Corey Brown in the house, one of my most favorite persons in the world. He did a little time back in the day for something he did, but he's back with us stronger than ever. Linda Champion, running for the district attorney of Suffolk County. And, oh, yes, we do endorse her. What she's talking about is really what we want to happen throughout this county, Suffolk County. Would you think so, Jay?
I absolutely agree, Trey.
Oh, my goodness. And we have star power as well. Retired Judge Les Harris is in the building.
Les Harris, there we go.
Oh, yes, that is my man. He's done some great work in this community. And our final panelist, Mr. Ricardo Garcia, did a little time himself and was so important for him to be here today. He followed up with me to make sure he was on this panel. But let's just start out. Let me just ask the panelists very quickly, quick answer. Is prison for punish or rehabilitation, Corey?
Punishment, hands down.
Gotta move a little closer, brother.
Punishment, hands down.
Linda Champion, what would you think?
Punishment.
Ooh. Retired judge. How do we want to do this?
Judge.
Judge. Linda, straighten that out. Judge. That title always sticks. He earned that.
It should be for habilitation.
Okay.
Not rehabilitation.
I heard that. Hey, Ricardo, what do you think?
I got a two-part answer. I would say it's definitely for punishment, but it's also for warehousing.
Okay. I want to start with before we get inside the system. And this would probably go to Your Honor, to Les Harris, and to Linda as well. When you're thinking about sentencing somebody, does it come into play the needs of others, like what the victim went through, or is it just a guideline that you're going to stick with? How do you determine the time that you're going to deal with, and how would you deal with the time that you're going to recommend to someone to go away?
Such a mixed question. It is one of those things where you have to do it individually. You have to look at the crime, you have to look at the impact it's had on other people's lives, and you have to look at what is the future of the person who is standing before you. Can you make a difference in this person's life? Okay. So I take all those things into consideration.
Okay. And Linda, more than likely, hopefully you'll be our next district attorney in Suffolk County. What would you think about that?
So I think judge answering that question comes from a fair and reasonable judge, but I've been in front of that judge who would hear me on sentencing, and I would ask for a particular sentence, and he would increase the sentence from what even the prosecution asked for. Okay. So while people think that the power is with the prosecutor in sentencing, most of those requests actually come from the nature of the crime and their gut.
Sure.
Their gut. But it's ultimately up to the judge to set the sentence.
Absolutely. I've been in a world quite a bit of my life around public defenders, around defense attorneys. Your Honor, and Linda, once again, I'm going to go to you on this. How do you feel about an individual that comes back and forth in front of your court multiple times? Does that come into play when you think about sentencing that person for the third, fourth, fifth time that he's come in front of your court? And does the penalties become worse?
Depends on what the charges are. You see, we send people right back to the situation that they came from. So how do we expect them to be any different? You know, when you put them right back in the same environment with the same problems they had, you're going to get the same results. So punishing a person sometimes for being poor, sometimes for having a mental health issue, sometimes for not having any options in their life, doesn't make sense to me. And so that's why I'm always looking for creative ways of sentencing someone.
Sure.
And I don't blame the person if they come back. If you continue to prosecute people and you don't prosecute their conditions that they're living in and you turn a blind eye to it, you should expect them to come back. And they do, because when they're leaving, they say, see you when you get back.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine that. Let me just say to folks, too, please call in today. The numbers are 617-282-0685, 617-282-7794, or 617-265-2679. Corey and Ricardo, I have to ask this question. You're talking about the judge. We're talking about the prosecutor. How did it feel when you were standing or sitting in front of these decisions that were being made about your life? Did you feel like they actually knew anything about you and the plight that you were going through, or the situations that you were in while they were juggling your life in their hands?
No. And I say that because, I mean, my trial was very public, so they heard everything, and still, it was still more or less, you're just gonna be punished no matter what. It was just, I mean, I always tell you, I own what I did, and it is, I don't like to say it is what it is, but it is. But in regards to when I was sentenced, and even the prosecutor, it was more or less like he was using like tactics, like standing in front of my mom so I couldn't see my mom. Like, what is that? And it just left a sour taste.
Sure. It was something too. I can actually remember testifying at your trial, and it was something. It was something. I had felt like I was a very conditioned person at that time. Hadn't been in court so many different times, but it was an experience. Ricardo, how do you feel about this?
Well, I was very young. I was 17 years old when I caught my case, and during the sentencing process and just the whole trial process, the child came back out of me. The fake thug that I was portraying out there quickly left when I seen that I didn't have, I was getting ready to lose my freedom, and then seeing my family go through what they went through, and seeing the victim in my case, their family, and it was just the sense of not being in control and having someone else make a decision on your life was horrifying and terrifying for a 17-year-old child.
Sure. Cool. Let me just go to another phase. First day of going into prison, what was that like?
Oh man, that's a good question.
Honestly, Trace, it was another day. I had already been sentenced for 2 years. It was another day, a different facility.
How about you, Ricardo? How did it feel your first time going into the system?
It was very scary. Actually, one of the correction officers, who was a female, walking me into Walpole, the first question she asked me, she says, "Whose baby are you?" Wow. And I said, "I'm my mama's baby." And then she asked me if I knew anybody, and unfortunately, my uncle was serving a life sentence in Walpole at the time, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but it was almost like welcoming. You see familiar faces from the neighborhood. It was like walking into a high school. There was so many young people there. So.
Sure. I'm going to phrase this question in this way so all the panelists can get into this discussion. So, and I'm sure you can tell the difference as a prosecutor, as a judge, because I know I can on the street level, a difference between a real thug coming in front of me and a kid that really just trying to be in a certain way. I'm curious. They talk about the recidivism rates being so high. No, let me jump to another question. They talk about, I hear people say, I can do time standing on my head. When you see people come in that are that tougher breed, that sentencing really doesn't affect them that it would do, the way it would someone else, how do you feel in dealing with those situations? And would the two of you think that that sentence is true? And do you want to be around those types of individuals?
Well, wasn't just a judge. I was a public defender. I was a prosecutor. I was a social worker. I was a probation officer. I was a teacher.
Is there anything that you did not do to help this community?
One of the things I learned is that children adapt, and they will put on the face that's necessary for their survival. It might not be their true face, but it's the face that they put on, it's the walk that they put on, it's the attitude that they will put on and able to survive. Some of the brightest, most capable men I've ever met have been in the prisons. I went up to Norfolk Prison for 20-something years, and what wasted talent, as they would say.
Sure.
Being locked away from us as a community.
Sure. Linda?
So for me, I think that the conditions that we're living in our community, you're already imprisoned in a lot of ways. Some kids can't leave a particular street. They can't walk around freely without watching their back. And even for me, when I was growing up living in Texas with my grandmother, my uncle was a drug dealer and a heroin addict. And so you feel confined to a space if you're living in a house where there's abuse, where there's drug dealing, where there's so much instability. So like you said, Ricardo, it's like a high school reunion. At least now someone else is watching your back. At least now you know where you're going to lay your head down at night.
Let me say this to folks. When you have professionals that are in the court systems that understand the community from a different perspective, those are the types of folks that you would hope are engaged in the process on a consistent basis. Corey and Ricardo, what do you think about that? When you hear people talk about they can do time on their head, is that because prison's too easy?
Nah, I mean, it's I have to agree with the judge. It's a lot of it is for face value, but in the same breath, it's the resilience in a person.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like if you tell yourself, I'm gonna be good, and then you'll be good. I can do this standing on my head.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But also,
but that can go on the other side too. I could do this stand on my head, and I'm gonna act a fool in it.
No, definitely. But it's actually a little joke, like to some of the older guys in prison. Is like when you see some of the younger guys, you go, it'll sink in like 5 years.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Wow. Like that kind of thing. Because for the first few years, you're just running around doing whatever. But when it sits in, and you're like, I don't want to curse, but when you're like, damn, with some guys that are lifers, like, I'm never going home.
Sure. Just to give everyone a little warning, that word that he just used is very close to getting us fined. So we have to, turn it into a mad second. We don't want that. My wallet can afford it, but luckily we have the church. We will appeal. Ricardo, what do you think, Ricardo?
Yes, I would agree with the judge as well. I was just recently in Norfolk as well. I returned to speak to the brothers there, and this was 20 years ago that I got out, and I still see some of the same people that were there, and I stay in communication with 25, 30 years. So we put on that sort of facade, the tough guy facade.
Sure.
But like the brother said, as the time goes by, and you're getting gray and you're getting older, you're not getting out, it starts to sink in.
I also, just really quickly, I want to mention that I've had people tell me, I went in to do 2 years and I ended up doing 10. Once again, I just want to say, they're committing crimes in prison. Once again, I'm going to go back to what we initially started, is prison too easy? Do we need to put more restrictions on folks? And I'm going to throw one more question into that because we have to go to Jay next. Everyone talks about the recidivism rate of prisons. Are people going back and forth because it's easy? I'm willing to commit the crime on the street because when I go to prison, I'm not really worried about that too tough at all. I can handle that.
Nah.
Whoever.
Okay, well, you mentioned recidivism, and why it's not easy. But here's my take on that. In the beginning, I said warehousing. So when you're locked up now, you're being warehoused. In most cases, you're 23 hours a day locked up. So, but everything is taken care of you. You have food, clothing, and shelter. So once you do a certain amount of time and you come back into society and you don't have the proper skills to create a job for yourself, the proper skills to go get a job, because now you have a criminal background, you can't pass a background, you can't pass a query, so things become harder out here. So yes, in some sense, prison is easy because things are taken care
Wow, I
for
like
you.
that.
So then you recidivize. You end up going back.
Sure.
And that's why it jumps from 40% to now 51%. And in Norfolk, I said to the brothers, I sat in those chairs. And the recidivism rates dictates that half of you that come out, or more than half, are going back because of the warehousing.
Because it's tough on the outside. On the core. How about you? Then we're going to go to Jay. Here, questions from around the country.
It would go back to what the judge said as far as just guys being adaptable. You know, if you can adapt to any situation at any time, then it's not about, you know, I went back to prison. Yeah, I mean that's definitely not good. But in your mindset, it's I know how to bid, so I'll be all right.
Sure.
You know?
Well, one thing I'm going to say about Corey Brown, too, good guy, ended up in a bad situation, but has come home doing all the right things. Proud of you, Corey. Jay, what we got, baby?
I don't know about
Trey, right now, man, this topic is brewing up, and there's a lot of questions. And the first question is actually from Donald from Nashua, New Hampshire, and he
I
said,
thought you was going to see Nashville Street Jam, but that's going, right? He making calls from the prison.
talk about luxury. Like, yo, we got a question. We got the new cell phone. So he says, he asked a question: what programs are there for an individual who is just coming home from prison to help them ease their way into society? And this goes to Judge.
I have no idea.
Wow. So anybody? Anybody
Yeah,
else
I can answer it.
Can I stay on it? You said habilitation. So if you don't know about the programs, how does that work?
You know, I worked with a program called the People's Academy,
Sure.
trying to create a training program that would take men from prison and women from prison to give them a skill. The obstacles that T. Michael Thomas faces in trying to create a program that would service people like this are so high and so difficult. He's put 15 years into trying to do this, and we're still fighting.
Wow. What? Go ahead. You were saying.
Yeah, actually, the gentleman that invited me here today, Mr. Kevin Sibley, who started an office about 7 months ago, is the Office of Returning Citizens under the mayor, Marty Walsh. Also, there two sisters, Charmaine Higgins and Mrs. Prince, who they're starting a program called More Boston. And that particular program is taking returning citizens and making them into entrepreneurs. But it's a matter of getting the message out. And me currently as well, working with some people to create programs for people returning, and also preventative work going into the schools and into the neighborhoods and educating our youth too, and using those brothers and sisters that are coming back to share their stories like us to prevent, because they glorify the crime, they glorify the drug dealers in the cars that are coming back to share their stories like us to prevent, because they glorify
I just want to say that one of the things we have to do is make sure that there are programs out there. The Senate is just trying to pass a new bill to make sure that people who are returning citizens can get a Massachusetts identification card. In passing that bill, they call it a bill to provide identification to homeless individuals. But in my opinion, anyone coming out of being incarcerated fits that definition. There are also programs that are out there for returning citizens who want or need help paying their rent. There's state-based programs that will give you up to $4,000 annually to help pay your light bill, your rent bill, if you're facing eviction. For those individuals that are facing discrimination, they need to start filing complaints with the, civil rights offices, and there's one in the city of Boston, if they're being faced with discrimination where people are checking their quarries and for minor offenses refusing to give them clean, quality, affordable housing. And then there are other programs that will provide mental health and support services like Beyond the Yellow Tape and things like the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, which can help people overcome the effects of trauma, because even if you're coming back into the community, you still suffer from the effects of post-traumatic stress and other things that impact you. One of the things that I would say to Corey that you don't often hear from people, and one of the things he said is, I accepted responsibility for my actions. And I think as a prosecutor, if you meet someone and they're saying, okay, I own it, I did this, I think that's someone you need to work with and help them. And that's, for me, when it should be from prison to rehabilitation. Someone who accepts their responsibility, admits their mistake, then I wouldn't want to see prison in that instance. I would want to see rehabilitation.
Now tell me that's not going to be a good prosecutor.
No, I know my vote's going to.
You know what I'm saying? Showing that sees the legal aspects of things and knows about the other side of it, the other play. I know we're supposed to be our sponsorship, but Jay, one more, and team, if we don't mind, we're going to skip our dessert piece today just to keep our panel going today. Is that all right? All right, go ahead, Jay.
We have another question from Miss Stacy, and she's out of NYC, and she asks, Is privilege in prison reserved for people who have money or an affluent background? And this is for anybody in the on the panel.
Privilege. I'm not really understanding the
Have
question.
you seen anybody in the system?
Your canteen money.
Well, have you seen anybody that came in there that had some real money that was mixed in the system with you and was treated differently because of that? Or if you, like Linda said, if you have money in the system,
right,
can you buy yourself into different things to benefit you?
Nah, it just depends.
That's television.
Yeah.
So let's say somebody who's like a celebrity, and they coming into prison. Now, do they have like certain privileges that ordinary inmates don't have?
To be honest, it depends on what prison.
Okay.
Because you take a prison like Norfolk, inmates in there cooking food. You take a prison like Walpole, you're gonna get taxed. And it depends on who you know.
Right.
Prisons are very segregated as well. So, people of different races tend to take care of their own. And not just that, before you even enter the door, I know all about your case.
So the prisoners know all about that?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And the COs will tell you, this person's a diddler. That means a child molester, by the way.
Really?
This person is a rapist. This person's a snitch. And that will determine how your stay is going to be.
Really?
So it depends on where you're at.
Okay.
Because in Norfolk, you ain't going to do anything because you don't want to lose the luxury of having to be able to cook your own food.
But you also have to think that money, too, gives people access to people who can come visit them. And if someone's paying attention to your well-being, it's no different than someone being in a nursing home. If someone is there paying attention to how you're being treated, in my opinion, from what I've seen on the outside, they're less likely to mess with you. But in my building last month, one of the correction officers committed suicide inside of my garage.
Wow.
And and for the life of any of us couldn't understand what had happened. But you have to remember too, what he's talking about, the guards sharing information, they're doing time just like everybody else.
They're doing life with life.
They're doing time too. So they too get indoctrinated into that system.
Okay.
And one of the things we have to always remember, everything in the prison is for profit.
Yes.
Yeah,
Telephone calls, food, everything is overpriced. So somebody coming in with money has some advantages.
Sure.
Not necessarily with the other folks they're serving time with, but in what they can get. They can get on the phone and stay on the phone.
Sure.
So they can maintain contact with their family. They can eat something other than ramen noodles. And so it does matter if you have money. It's just, it doesn't protect you necessarily if you're a diddler or whatever from other inmates.
Let me just say this too. Keep this between us, please. But a very well-known person, his trial was very publicized. He went to prison for life, killed a few folks, actually. Couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe when I picked up the phone one day and it was him on the phone. He had a phone in his system, a cell phone, and called me on the phone and had a discussion with me. Surprised me. Cheryl, let's hear from our sponsors.
Okay. week, we have our local sponsors, Urbanica for all your build and design needs, Eddie Jenkins Law, Callaway Graphics, Sweet Ember Bakery, J. Rockwell Studio, Shun's Kitchen, Janie Construction, Leo Papil, George Kramer, and some anonymous donors. Our national sponsors, Better Belly out of Chicago, Illinois. I got that wrong the last time. The Shop, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Apon Concepts, Miami, Florida.
Let's amp discussion up a little. Lifers, someone that has killed somebody. I'm sorry to say, I'm just going to ask this question. Should they have visitors? Should they have privileges in prison? Should they be punished the worst punishment that you could ever give? 23-hour-a-day lockdown, no television, no books. Should that happen? And I'm asking this based on how the victims' families may feel about those situations. Anybody chime in?
I want to, because I had a discussion with a friend, Janet Connors, who is very much into restorative justice. She's one of the leader advocates of restorative justice. One of the things she said to me, and I remember her saying it, is she saw the young men who killed her son as monsters.
Sure.
And then she said, wait, I can't do that because monsters just do what monsters do.
Mm-hmm.
These were young men who probably would come back into our community at some point in their lives. And if we let them escape by calling them monsters, then we failed. And I believe in restorative justice.
Sure.
You have to get those beliefs before you're touched yourself.
Let me ask you this, Your Honor, and Linda as well, and anyone else. I'm never coming home. What about those individuals?
There's no such thing. There's a sentence of life without the possibility of parole is today. You don't know what's going to happen 20 years from now or 30 years from now. And I believe that we prepare everyone to come back, to give them the living skills, the communication skills, the ability to interact, the ability to care about other people. A lot of people that I know, that I grew up with, couldn't care about me because they didn't care about themselves.
Sure.
And we need to work around that.
All right.
So I have 2 first cousins doing life sentences and 1 second cousin doing a life sentence. My first cousin, I fault the system because he's doing a life sentence. He was a soldier. He came back from suffering from the effects of the Iraq War. He then was in a car with my grandmother. A lady got off work after working a long double shift. She crossed the line, hit them head on. My grandmother died on impact, and my first cousin was seriously injured. As a result of those accidents, plus the effects of the war, he became addicted to drugs and then became addicted to street drugs. And it was those street drugs that caused him to be in search of those drugs.
Sure.
And with no help, no guidance, no support, not from the VA or anyone else, because once you become addicted to a substance, people just look at you as an addict,
Sure.
and they don't care what your contribution was to this country or how you arrived at the point of your life that you're at. And then he went and in trying to get drugs, robbed a lady and seriously injured her. And in the state of Texas, when they see a black man coming, they don't care what your background
Sure.
is. They look at the color of your skin and they're going to launch you.
Sure.
And so he will spend the rest of his natural life in a Texas prison. Wow. So for me, it's very much that we have to look at the individual. We have to continue to humanize the process and treat them as individuals. My heart goes out to him because what happened to him is a direct result of what our shortcomings in treating our victims, and not victims, but our veterans,
Sure.
and helping them.
Good
And it
point.
could have been avoided
Sure.
had someone just provided him with the mental health treatment he needed from watching his grandmother die, and also from the drug addiction, which he became addicted to drugs from the pains of physical injuries.
Sure.
So I just think that we have to always humanize the process, and I agree with the judge. They are people. And so no matter what the crime, and like Corey said, if you own it, then they understand what they did wrong, and you treat them still as human beings.
Okay. Corey and Ricardo, I want to ask you these questions. I'm going to put these two together. Was there ever any scary point in prison? And what made you not want to be back there and do the things that you're doing now? Because I've worked with gang members, I've worked with killers, I've worked with some of the worst of the worst. I just don't know. Sometimes we give them all the resources, they do everything right, Sometimes they just never want. I've had kids say to me, I don't want anything. I love hustling. I love selling drugs. I love the money. I love the excitement. I love the action. This is what I'm going to do for life. How about you? Was there ever a scary point that said, I don't want to be here again? And what made you make the changes not to go back again?
I mean, but see, Tracy, you know me, so you know me before all of that happened.
Sure.
And to go back to the other question, it's kind of like, as far as the life is, I could very well been a lifer. So, I mean,
was there ever a scary point there for you while you were inside?
I mean, every day is scary.
Sure.
Because you never know what could happen. No matter who you clicked up with or regardless. It just, you know what I mean? You just never know what happens. And the day that it's probably the wrong word, but it is the right word. When you're comfortable is when things happen.
Okay.
So
you got to stay on point.
You always have to be on point.
Sure.
Always.
Well, and listeners, what Corey was saying about me knowing him.
Very stressful.
Yeah, he was a very nice person, very good guy, doing all the right things everywhere for everyone, helping out. Bad situation happened. Ricardo, how about that question? Was there ever a scary point for you, and what made you stay on the right track?
Like Corey said, every day you have to be on point. But what got me was when they started to tag people from the inner city with the STG tag, the security threat group tag.
What is that exactly?
So they were identifying people and profiling them as gang members, national gangs, and it was when the first introduction of, because if you're from Boston, you particular street, you associate with that street. And then it became a point where there was now Bloods, Crips, Latin Kings, and if you were just hanging with somebody, they would tag that on you, and then if you had that tag on you, you couldn't move to a lower security prison. In fact, you can be sentenced, with the RICO Act as well, and get a federal charge on you too, just for association. So that to me, I looked at, man, I'm young, I'm never going to get out of here. I'm growing up in here, and what changed me, and at this point, all the programs were gone. So it was this warehousing now. What changed me was a Final Call newspaper from the Nation of Islam.
Okay.
And the brothers, and those brothers were mostly lifers, and they embraced me, and I'm still in contact with those brothers, and they mentor me and continue to mentor me. And back to the first question about lifers, they're a resource to us, because life is that accept responsibility for what they've done and have remorse and have atoned for what they've done can help the youth. I streamed them in to some of the young over the phone to explain, what they're going through, and they're 30 years in, locked up. So that was a turning point for me.
So go ahead, Judge Harris.
One of the things that I understand about me, how close I came to possibly being a lifer. When I was young, the first time I got stabbed, if I could have found that guy,
wouldn't have been no judgeship.
Wouldn't have been no judgeship, because I know how I felt, and I grew up in the projects. I hung with gang members because they were my relatives.
Sure.
That doesn't mean I was in a gang, but I was around them. But if I could have found that first young man, I know my life would have been very different. So I got blessed that I didn't come across him.
Let's stick with that right there. Judge, prosecutor, you know that you have to recommend this person to go to jail. This person did something, and you there's really no leeway to bounce around letting that person go. And you have to make that tough decision to push them hard. But on the other side of this, you say to yourself, taxpayers are paying for this person to go. They're going to a place where there's programs, these other things. Should prosecutors and judges be able to add on something to the recommendation that you make, that a person should be punished a certain way? Because I'm sure there's going to be certain folks that are good people that have made one mistake, and there's going to be a whole lot of bad people that make multiple mistakes. How would you deal with that, or should we change some things?
I had that, it was agreed upon recommendation. Young man involved in a shooting, had never been in trouble in his life, yet he was pleading out to a 5 to 7 year sentence. same sentence as the person who was his co-defendant, who had a record,
Sure.
who actually did the shooting. And I had to give that young man some words. Said, you cannot let this define you for the rest of your life. You made a mistake, but you have to treat this mistake as a bump in your life. And you do not give up on yourself, and you do not give up on your parents and your friends, and let this define you. Because that's not who you were before this case, and it's not who you're going to be after this case if you choose. And he wrote back to me and said, thank you.
Sure.
Because he was going to vegetate, he said. But this kept him from doing that.
Linda-
and he did well in
Linda,
it.
you responded. We're going to take a call from a caller.
So for me, the situation that Judge Harris describes gets difficult for me because I think that by association, kids get wrapped up in situations that they shouldn't find themselves in. I have another first cousin doing a life sentence because his friends called him after an aggravated armed robbery. He knew nothing about it, so he showed up and picked them up after the robbery, where a woman was shot and subsequently paralyzed. Down south, when your parents get that call, they say you just tell the police the truth, and you just tell them whatever they want to hear. But for him, the truth meant implicating himself in a conspiracy, because he knew that they had planned to rob someone. While he didn't know who they were going to rob, he never reported that they would be robbing someone. And as a result of that knowledge, you get the same sentence
Sure.
as your co-defendants. And so for me, that's where, as a prosecutor, we have the ability to try to maybe balance out the equities, the scales of justice, and for us to really try to do what's right. If we're going to help people, then we got to help them in a meaningful way. I don't necessarily know if having someone with the wrong friends, it teaches them the right lessons if they get incarcerated for something they actually didn't do.
Sure,
I think
sure.
we have to focus on violent offenses, and people have to be segregated. But the people who are just sort of trying to survive in this community, they can't get caught up in that wave.
Okay.
So I got. Oh, go ahead.
Let's hear from our caller, and Jay, you take over. We have a caller. Please, who are we speaking with?
Yes, hi. My name is L.V. Randolph. I represent the Roxbury Business Development Group.
Good to hear from you. What's your
and
question?
I'm calling in really because I've taken notice of this program, and
Well, we like you for
one
that.
of the-
We like you. Yes, we do.
one of the things that I've noticed about all of these conversations is that we're focusing on the experience of how one goes to jail. But we're not focusing on the experience necessarily without government intervention, the tax dollar, on how one comes out of jail and then what happens after that. Now, I'm going to predicate my question with this experience of my own. I had an opportunity to work with a organization many years ago that was helping returning citizens. They were in a halfway house, and they were looking for ways to get them or transition them back into society. And my role was to help them to develop their resumes and to get a job. And what I noticed was these guys were coming in. First of all, they didn't even understand how to interview. There was nothing that happened to them before going in that helped them to be productive in terms of getting a job, interviewing skills, how you dress, all those things. None of that ever happened.
I'm sorry to rush you along, but please get to your question.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. My question is, what do you, in your view, would you attribute economic circumstances to how people get to jail? And what would you attribute in terms of preventing recidivism, people starting businesses and becoming productive entrepreneurs in their own communities?
All right, let's take a crack
And
at
what
that.
is your commitment, collectively, what is your commitment to that? That's my question, but my experience is much greater than that.
Sure.
And I think
Let's
that
take that
needs to
question.
be
Thank you
addressed.
very much.
Well, one of the things that we have to talk about is social equity.
Mhm.
How do we pay back those folks who have been the victims
There we go.
of a slanted, sometimes,
Sure.
criminal justice system? How do we try to make them whole? And that is not an easy thing to do. How do you give back a young man who had 5 years of his life taken from him on a wrong conviction? How do you help a young person who has never had the opportunity to have a job interview? We did some training with the Boston Police to teach young men how to tie ties. We had to teach the police officers first because they wear clip-on ties.
Sure.
And no one had taught them. It's those little things that so many of us take for granted.
Absolutely.
About shaking a hand and looking the person in the eye.
Right.
About taking your hat off when you come into a building. The things that were beat
Sure,
into us as
sure.
kids. About walking properly down the street so that you're not intimidated. Things
Sure.
that we don't even think about that we do naturally. And young people have never had the opportunity to experience. So part of our job is to give them those experiences.
Inside the system?
Inside the system and outside.
Okay.
We have to welcome back our kids.
But it's not that easy to go into a prison or a jail to help people, though. So go try to give a book to someone who's incarcerated right now. Try to give someone who's Muslim a prayer mat to pray and see how that works out. It's not going to go too well. And so if you're going to do this and do it right, we have to humanize the process and we have to treat people as humans and give people second chances. What happens, though, is, and everyone is guilty of it, every time someone comes out of being incarcerated, we call them a returning citizen, but at the backyard barbecue, you say, here comes Joe, he just got out of the house. And so as individuals, we have to check ourselves and we have to make sure that we're giving people a second chance and we're not labeling them as cons or ex-felons.
Sure.
And then what we have to do is, the average family of color is living, not only are they living paycheck to paycheck, because paycheck, at least another one's coming.
Right.
They got $8 in the bank account. They have no savings. And so we have to start teaching our kids how to save and how to understand economic wealth and how to understand the value of owning land. Oftentimes we're not taught that land has a powerful tool to it. And one of the biggest tools it has is it builds neighborhoods, because it's different if you know the person who lives to the left and right of you and the person who lives in front of you and behind you. If you're transient and you're constantly renting and you're bouncing from place to place, you know no one, and guess what? No one knows you.
Sure. I'm going to make a call
That's a
today.
good
We're
point.
going to skip everything today and just go through with the discussion. Jay, now, go ahead.
Real quick, just as I want to endorse Miss Linda Champion because she's speaking all the right things. And as you guys was just talking, the question just came to my mind. Right now, if an individual who did not commit a crime, right, and he did not do it, just like the example you was just giving, he did not do the crime, and he is being and he goes towards the judge, and they saying, hey, you got to serve 3 to 5 years. Now, why, if I didn't commit something, why in the world am I going to do that time?
Are you saying they were with somebody and they actually?
Yeah, or they was with somebody and they didn't do nothing wrong, but they was in the car, for example. You know what I mean? And so if I didn't do nothing, why am I'm being given this time? Why am I going to serve this time? Why is that? Why am I just accepting that? Or what do you guys think about that? Why am I just accepting that crime?
I have represented a few young men who were just there, but weren't perceived as being just there. I had a young girl come in my court who had a fight with another girl, beat the other girl up twice. The third time, the other girl's mother, aunt, cousins all came with her and surrounded this girl and said, now fight. Well, of course, she lost that fight because she didn't fight back. She was afraid. So being there is sometimes more than enough to change the outcome of an event. Okay, because the other person perceives you as a threat also and will not fight back. Won't fight back if it was just one-on-one because you're there.
Got it.
And so you are giving moral support or something to the perpetrator.
Right.
But on the other part of your question is what happens if you have somebody who's innocent, who is incarcerated, and who needs someone to have fresh eyes and look at their case. For the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, there's a conviction integrity unit, but that unit is occupied by no one. It just has a name.
Wow, really?
And so what you have to do is, in the same way that you would have with the police department and internal affairs office, we need an internal affairs office as part of the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office. We need someone who can give fresh eyes, because I personally know someone who was convicted of murder, who didn't commit the murder, out of Rhode Island, who has since been released, but they were released because they had family members who had the resources that could fight that wrongful conviction and bring the attention to it that it needed. And they now live in the community. And I won't say their name because I don't know if they would want people knowing that.
Right.
But the reality is, he says to me every time he sees me, but Linda, the kid with me didn't do it either, but he's still locked up. His family doesn't have any money. And so we have to start paying attention to those kinds of things. If someone is truly innocent, you would rather 100 people guilty walking free than one innocent man spend 1 day in jail. That's how serious it is to not wrongfully convict someone.
Okay. Hey, once again, my vote's going to Linda. Okay.
She got mine too, Jay.
She got my vote. All right, so we got questions. This is a pretty hot topic. The phone lines is going, and people are sending in their questions. Now, this is actually from Alan, and he is in Philadelphia, and he asks, is prison, it's a two-part question, is prison a business? And do you think that sometimes judges may over-sentence someone because they want to keep the prison full?
That's all judges.
One of the things you can look at is what happened in Pennsylvania, where a couple of judges are now in prison from the juvenile system because they were making money off of sentencing children.
Wow.
When you have private individuals making money and giving kickbacks to judges, lawyers, whoever, you have a corrupt system. When we privatized prisons, we ensured that first off, justice wouldn't be done in prisons, that it was more about making the dollar than it was about working with a prisoner. And yes, it is a problem. I think no prison should be privatized. We should not allow people to make money out of incarcerating others.
Okay.
And you also shouldn't, in elections, let people who benefit from a system. So, if you're a defense attorney, you got no business writing a check to any candidate running for office. If you're a prosecutor, you have no business writing a check to anybody running for office. If you're a police officer, you have no business cutting a check to anybody running for office. Now, I'll say that, but I have taken checks from police officers.
Because it's still legal. It's still legal.
It's still legal. But the reality is, there are some positions, sacred positions, like the role of a judge, sacred positions like the district attorney, where there should be no concept of pay to play.
Sure. I like that.
I wanna
Jay, go ahead. One more question.
I say shame on the politicians and the business people for privatizing prisons. All right, because they're breaking up families. They're corrupt. You see, in the streets, we look at the police officers as an extension of another gang. In fact, back in the day, the Boston Police gang unit used to wear shirts that said "Boston Police, the biggest gang in the city."
Really? Wow.
That was in response to a statement that I made.
That was your statement?
And was totally misconstrued.
But the judge just said it. What can you do? If the judge says it, what can you do?
But Ricardo, you agree that now that I'm a politician, we are all innocent until proven guilty.
and you got my vote.
Jay, one more question.
This is going to this person. She says we have Calvin out of this is Brenda out of ATL. What up, A? Is it true that some inmates have plasma televisions in their cells?
I was going to bring that up next. Televisions, Facebook,
I have been to Walpole Prison. I have been to Norfolk Prison. I have been to almost the Bridgewater. I've never seen that. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Every state is different.
Sure.
Federal system is different than the
Sure.
state system. And so I cannot say it's not true.
Corey Ricardo, Facebook. I've heard about Facebook in prison, televisions.
I mean, yeah, we got TVs, but it's not, and it's not a smart TV or nothing like that. You know what I mean? Nah.
No.
Well, I would say many things are smuggled into prisons all the time.
Well, I'm saying
A plasma TV?
I've never seen a plasma TV.
Would you stick that in your jacket?
No, I've never seen that. I've never seen that, but I've seen like YouTube videos of viral. Of, I don't know how real that is, but I know that cell phones do show up in prisons, and I mean,
That's normal, though.
not a plasma TV or anything like that. I've never seen that.
Can I ask a question to you guys? Because we hear stuff about prisons, and one of the things we hear is that inmates are given water that may not be safe to drink, that dogs are provided with bottled water if they're in a training program, but the inmate who the dog is living with has to drink out of the faucet, and the water is coming out in a different color. So how true are these rumors, or is this true?
I mean, I don't know if the dog program lets them drink bottled water, but I mean, you don't really want to drink from the sink.
But if you don't drink from the sink, what do you drink?
Is that bad, Corey?
You got to buy some water.
Is it that bad, Corey?
And what's the cost of buying water out of the canteen?
I mean, but that's the business part. Anything they see that we buy, the price jumps.
So what would an inmate pay for a bottle of water?
Oh, I don't. Probably.
Best guess.
Probably $1. I don't know. It's probably $1.
But that's a lot of money.
That's
And how
like
much-
$10 on the
Right,
outside.
because what would an inmate make at work? Pennies, right?
Yeah, $1 a day.
yeah.
$1 a day.
But let me ask you a question.
If you got a
to
job.
piggyback off of Linda, you committed a crime against my family. I'm a hardworking man. My family's hardworking. I go to court. I watch the judge sentence. Why didn't you give him more time? I watched the prosecutor. Why didn't you recommend more time? Fellas that have gone away, why would I want anything good for you in the system if you developed something against my family? Why would I want anything? And now you're telling me as a taxpayer I have to pay for that.
That's
Please.
why you don't write laws when you're angry. You don't write laws in reaction to a horrible case. You think about what's the value of a crime beforehand. I should not, if I am the victim, be deciding the sentence. The
That's a good
sentence
point.
should be appropriate for what happened. It shouldn't be revenge. Okay? And that's what so often our sentencing is. It's revenge. And that's not what our justice system is supposed to be about. And that's why I believe so strongly in restorative justice, not just for the person who's the perpetrator, but for the person who is harmed, because it helps both.
And think about this fact. We had a war on drugs. We put in place very harsh systems for people who are struggling with crack addiction. And we made all these laws that incarcerated them. But when the face of crack changed, and now it's prescription-based drugs, and it doesn't look like communities of color, now all of a sudden, those laws need to be relaxed. So what I say is, no matter what you do to a person, make sure you put yourself in that other person's shoes. Because if it's your kid next, you want to make sure that the system is fair and not unnecessarily harsh.
We're running out of time, and we have a lot of folks. I just want to ask one more question, and I'm going to give everyone a closing statement. Corey Ricardo, not a bad guy. I go to jail for something that happened. Can I go there and be left alone, do my time, come out, and then be able to be a productive citizen? Or even to add into that, if I do go to jail, are there hookups where folks go to jail, become better at what they were going to do on the streets and develop hookups?
Well, it depends on your mentality, and it depends on whether or not you want to accept responsibility for your actions. But the problem is that you're warehoused. There's really nothing there to rehabilitate or habilitate you, to prepare you to come out. And so what you see in the prisons now is you may come in a thief and leave with the mentality of a murderer, because that's what's around you. And you're being warehoused, you're being locked up, and then you come out, and you come out bitter, You come out angry. So, to answer the other question, can you be left alone? That depends on you. That depends on how you carry yourself as well.
Okay, cool.
Nah, I agree with him, and it's as far as being left alone, it's kind of like just a scenario waiting to happen, whether it be from another convict or the police, because it's just a matter of time. No matter how hard you try to stay out of everyone's way, it's just gonna be something. Right. Somebody's not gonna like you, and it's just, you know what I mean. It's just part of jail. You know what I mean?
We're running out of time. Judge Harris, we got about 30 seconds for a closing statement. Then we'll go to Linda, Ricardo, and Corey. You close us out.
We have to make our elected officials hold them accountable. We should have restorative justice in every prison. We should have it taught in our schools. We need to get out of this mentality of being vindictive towards those folks who've harmed our society. We've got to change that approach. It's not working. Just like our drug approach hasn't worked, our war on crime hasn't worked either.
Okay, thank you, Judge Harris.
So we definitely need to, what Judge Harris said, we have to humanize this process. Let's focus on serious violent offenders, people who do have to be segregated, because let's face it, some people do have to go to jail. But for those people who are getting involved in petty offenses, let's help and support them. If you want to do crime prevention, you got to give people jobs, you got to give them access to education, you got to make sure everyone in our community has a place to live.
And what day should people come out and vote for you?
They should come out and vote. If you want to change the system, come out and vote on September 4th. And it's my hope to return the office of the district attorney where it belongs, to the people of Suffolk County. And I hope that if I'm elected in office, that when you see me, you'll always say, "Well done, my true and faithful servant."
I like that. I like that.
Amen.
Ricardo.
I want to say that we should support the returning citizens, that we should, if we have resources for them, we should direct them in those resources. We should encourage them. Also, we should build our communities and encourage them to make our communities a safe and decent place to live.
Cora, I'm sorry, we run out of time. Cora, I'm sure you'll be back. This was a riveting discussion, Jay. What do you think?
Man, it was so awesome.
I took all your time, Corey.
Let's do it. We didn't even get to the national
And it was so
spotlight.
riveting that our producer over there said, "Amen." She ain't been to church in I don't know how long, Reverend Wall.
It's a
She
Wu-Tang
said,
gang.
"Hey, this Wu-Tang gang over there." Amen.
Amen.
Take us out, Jay.
Hey, keep knocking, keep rocking, folks. Once again, tune in. What's on the menu? Peace.